easy to have my phone number.
I'll say this.
Exactly. That was my
Sometimes
thing.
that's just.
And I think that first came from my head. Where did she like it? But I said she's getting
Well, I guess over here on the back wall, but I don't have a gavel tonight, so if everybody would participate, we will do our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. We're a little bit informal tonight for Christmas, but again, thank you. And we don't have a student of the month. Are we having board report? School, individual schools?
Nope.
No.
We're going to hit on the agenda. We'll stop and eat at some point in time and do a couple of presentations.
Okay.
We'll be extremely flexible.
Oh, well, that's great. Okay, then we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We need a motion to approve the November minutes.
I move.
Second.
Jill and Rick. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carried. And we need a motion to approve the claims for December. We have a motion on the floor. Need a second, please? Second. Thank you, Jill. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We need a motion to approve the salary increase for certified non-bargaining employees and non-certified non-bargaining employees of $17.50, which matches our certified bargaining. Okay, we have a motion. Need a second? Thank you, Rob. All those in, or any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay. We need a motion to open a preliminary hearing regarding our bond request. Motion to open it. This is a first preliminary determination hearing. It was in the packet. I move that we open. Thank you, Joe. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Rick. Discussion. Okay. We'll
You
go
want me to
ahead
give
and
a kind of an intro and get going?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a, part of this process, it's a two-step process, and later I'll give you the updated calendar so you can take a look at that. But part of it is a public hearing. There's no really any kind of approval needed. So we've invited Jason Tanza. I'll let him introduce his counterpart. And he's going to make a presentation. We passed the presentation out previously when we were looking at May, but it's changed. And the real positive thing is, remember, our assessed valuation went up 10%. So the bond proceeds we're going to have are going to be tremendously more, and I'll spend a little bit more time talking about that when I go through the budget. So, Jason, if you want to come up to the podium and I'll get the PowerPoint going. And that's in their packet, correct?
Yes. Yep. The PowerPoint's here.
Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit off the podium, but thank you for having me here tonight. As Dr. Kaiser mentioned, I'm Jason Cancel with Baker Tilly, and we serve as the school corporation municipal advisor. With me tonight is Joey Cardenas. He is a colleague of mine, so working with me on numbers, and I just wanted to introduce him to the board because he he's a proud Beach Grove alum, so he's been working with us. He's been working with us now for over a year. We enjoy having him, so thank you from Bgsn. Thank you for turning out good kids like Joey. But regardless, that's not why I'm here tonight. Why I'm here is to go over the maximum parameters being established here in this first hearing for the construction referendum, and also talking about the taxpayer impact of the construction referendum. And in addition to that, I'll also be talking about the proposed operating referendum and the 20-cent tax rate impact that we'll be asking for at the May 2020 election. So I do have a presentation, and I don't know.
They have it in the packet.
Okay.
I'll get it up here on the screen. So if you want to go ahead and move through it.
But it's not too long. It's 8 slides, but it does summarize what we're going to talk about here. So with that, I'm going to turn to slide 2. And slide 2 is a table that summarizes the maximum being established here tonight. The maximum borrowing amount being discussed is $17,500,000 with a maximum repayment term of no more than 20 years. Maximum annual payment of $1,267,000. But really what that means is a maximum annual tax rate of 25 cents. I'll give it a pause. So again, what we are discussing here tonight for the construction piece, what we're talking about right now is strictly for the construction piece. Is a $17.5 million first mortgage bond. Again, with a maximum amount of 17.5, a maximum repayment term of no more than 20 years, a maximum annual payment of $1,267,000, and what that equals is a maximum annual tax rate of 25 cents. This $17.5 million bond will generate just shy of $16.7 million for the school corporation to use for construction improvements. And based upon interest rates and where they are today, we would estimate that interest expense to be $4,761,000. And the next slide just summarizes what I mean when I say we're borrowing $17.5 million. That is the maximum. But there will be 1 year of capitalized interest expense, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And then issuance costs for the bond of $4,000 estimated. And that's how we generate $16.7 million. So the borrowing being $17.5 million, but $16.7 more.
Any questions, anything he's talked about so far?
Please feel free to stop me at any time.
I know it seems like a lot of interest, but it is over a 20-year period of time. Just think what mortgages and how that relates from that standpoint.
So this is a visual of the already outstanding debt service payments of Beach Grove School, as well as what the proposed repayment term would look like for the $17,500,000 bond. So here in the blue, you can see the already outstanding payments of the school corporation, and the green represents the 2015 bonds that are approved via referendum. The gray represents what we're talking about here tonight, those on top. This hash bar here is capitalized interest expense. That's the first year of capitalized interest expense. And the main takeaway here is that there would not be a tax rate impact associated with these. That would not be money that would be paid for from bond proceeds. And then the next payment here in 2022 is a smaller payment. You're trying to phase in that maximum tax rate. So that is an interest-only payment. The remaining 17 payments are $1,267,000. So that will have a 25-cent tax rate impact.
And one thing to point out, we talked about this a little bit in the past, as our assessed valuation goes up, that bar is going to drop. Tom and I do not believe, and he'll go through what Jason's done, kind of different scenarios. If it goes up, maybe it goes up 1%, 2%, that bar will come down.
If I'm following this correctly, that's 20-some% interest we're going to pay.
That's based upon today's interest rate. Yeah, it's a 19-year maximum repayment term.
That's like a bad credit card. You could get the better interest rate than that.
The rate's actually, the rate we're assuming is aggressive. It's 2.4%. It's just $17.5 million.
For 20 years. think of it this way, right now Lawrence Township just passed a referendum for 192 million, and they're going to be doing something similar over that period of time. So, it's, you know, if you look at other debt, it's
That's normal?
Yeah, it's normal.
Do that.
If we would go back and show you the other debt, all these others we've done over here, it's pretty normal. In fact, these interest rates are pretty strong, very positive right now.
We ask for aggressive rates from Key Bank because we want to offer a higher bar.
Yeah. So again, it's pretty normal, and again, the interest rates now are better than they have been in years past. So it's pretty normal. Again, I just try to warn, Washington Township just borrowed 90 million. They're going back out for a second referendum for another 90. And ours, believe it or not, I follow this. If you look at any of the updates I send you from the, you'll see numbers like this are not unusual. And I want to emphasize again, I put that in email, we really believe this will be the last construction referendum, because as you look at that chart, it starts going down. And we don't think we're ever going to hit that as high as it is, because that's 3 years from now, and we're pretty confident. We've been averaging a 5% AB increase. This year it was 10%. So we're going to modify that as it goes down. So as the AB goes up, all those different color debts will go down, because the payment is set. So as the assessed value goes up, we can lower the rate and keep that bouncing in a positive way down. So again, this is a good time for us to do it. Much better than we did it 6 months ago for a lot of different reasons. So, but it's not cheap to borrow money, and
But we are still in historic lows,
Yeah.
2.1%.
yes.
Have we looked at other ways to pay back? Like, can we pay back a little bit more to get the interest down, to have not so much interest payments? I mean, have we shopped around for interest, lower interest rates? Can we pay it back sooner? I mean, it does seem like it's a lot. I know we're borrowing a lot, but it's a lot of money that we're paying you as well. And I know you're here to make money, but I want to look at different ideas of how maybe we could lower that interest and pay it back quicker.
So one area I guess I would clarify on that is that as the AB goes up, can we make the arrangement that I always keep it at 25 cents when we set the budget? And whatever dollar amount that raises every year, 1.5 million, 1.6 million, 1.7 million, is that an arrangement that is allowed through governmental financing over this amount of time or not?
So going back, as far as, once we set, we don't have an interest rate yet. That will be determined until we sell the bonds. And right now, we can sort of market, sort of work until the bonds be approved, essentially in 2020. And so right now, what this is assuming is actually a bond sale in November 2020. So almost a full year from now. So we won't be able to lock in the interest rate until the end of next year, at the earliest.
So we might see a decrease
You might see
in the
an
interest
increase,
rate.
but for full transparency, you might see a loss.
Okay.
So right now, we just want to see current market.
So, they like the line 40,
Once these payments are locked in, that those are, so once we know what's going to do next year, those are locked in.
so you can afford it.
Correct. We also analyze a bond call redemption where the interest rate is very valuable in 8, 9, 10 years. Actually, we call it for a lower interest rate. We always look at that, especially on
And one thing we'll get into more as we move forward with this, there are some bonds that we think are going to be, we can refinance some other bonds
there's some candidates.
that we can refinance to help lower the total tax rate. Again, we don't want to get too far ahead of the process, because again, we're still talking a little bit down the road. The other options we have, as AB goes up, we can lower other funds, you know, so as the AB goes up, we can drop operating, we can drop the referendum rate if we need to. You know, we're asking for 45 cents, but if AB's going up, we don't, and that's an annual, yearly thing. Here this month or early January, we'll get what's called a 1782. At that point in time, Tom and I, we can sit down, let's say it's 3 years from now, the AB's gone up, we can actually lower the referendum tax rate, it's still, when AV goes up, we can still net the same amount. So we've got a lot of flexibility going forward that we didn't have 3 or 4 years ago. So, again, I emphasize that seems like a lot of money, but comparatively, what other districts are doing, it's pretty conservative from that standpoint. And as we go through the budget, we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck. And we also have some contingencies. If the rates do go up, we have a contingency plan of how we can deal with that. So we've spent a lot of time on what if and why. So,
And actually, if I can go back to the table and slide 2 if possible.
yep.
What we're talking about here tonight, one more, is this is the maximum we can establish here, is $1,267,000. That's based on the most recent NSS value. So we will not exceed $1,267,000 of payment. So from that is the maximum that would be potentially on the question.
So if the AV goes up, we now have to sell bonds, can that payment go down?
Yes, a payment can go down, but it cannot exceed.
So does everybody understand that? So, and you'll see a chart Tom will go through as the AV goes up between now and we sell them, that actual payment could go down, which means that the interest could also be affected by that. So again, it's tough when you're thinking this far out, but there's a reason we're trying to implement this over 3 years. It gives us a lot of flexibility to make some decisions. And those are annual decisions we'll come back to the board and talk about as we set the tax rate every December or January, depending on when that hits us. So again, with AV going up, we're not expecting a 10% increase, but we've had a 5 and a 10. That's huge in keeping those taxes lower moving forward. And again, Tom's going to go through, Jason said, he'll go through some different charts we shared with you, but we haven't gone through. We'll go through those before we take a break here. Any questions on that?
So that summarizes the construction referendum, but as you know, the school corporation is also looking at an additional 20-cent operating referendum rate on top of the 35 cents already outstanding. What this 20 cents asks to your taxpayers is generating the school corporation just under $1 million annually. So that's based upon, again, the most recent NSS value, which Dr. Kaiser mentioned, it's $486 million for 2020. That was a 10% jump. And a 20-cent ask of $486 million is $973,000. So the school,
And that does include the TIF area. On a referendum, we get those TIF dollars
yes,
on both these.
that includes $25 million of TIP. So again, this would be outstanding for 8 years, starting in 2021.
And this is the fund that as AV goes up, if we want to, we can lower that 20 cents. Is everybody clear on that? So that's a total of 35 now, it goes to 30, it goes to 55. But as the AV goes up, we can lower the tax rate and still generate that amount of money. Again, what's low is the tax impact to our taxpayers, which you'll see a lot of districts with the ability to do that as AV goes up.
And as Dr. Kaiser mentioned, the school has 35 cents outstanding. So at the May ballot question, the tax rate will show up as 55 cents, but the real additional is just 20. That's just legally, the 55 cents has to be on the question. I just want to make that clear. When you go and you see the question and it says 55, then it's also including the 35 cents from the May 15 election.
Is that 35 renewed then at that point?
Yes,
Yes.
for 8 years.
For 8 years.
The other thing to keep in mind, so that, again, as AV goes up, we can lower that rate, which lowers the, which generates the same amount of levy, and then 8 years from now, we can come back, and Cater did this, you can go ahead on the next referendum, you can lower that. AV's gone up, so we probably 8 years from now will not come back and ask for 55, it'll probably be 50 or even 45, because AV goes up, you can lower that. Again, keep in mind on the one chart, our tax rate's going down like this. So we're gonna see a blip, and then it's gonna start going straight down. Which again is a plus. For the first time we're seeing that. And again, we have another bond issue that we'll bring, maybe we'll talk about the meeting on the 14th. We'll show you another one we could refinance some dollars to even lower that tax rate and do some other things. So again, we have a lot of flexibility now we didn't used to have.
So is there any questions on, this is the operating revenue, the 27 additional on the 35, generate almost $1 million for 8 years.
And again, that's renewable. It used to be 7 years, now it's 8 years moving forward. We have that flexibility. With construction, again, we have that debt dropping off, which will lower the taxes as we move forward.
And that 973 is a little higher than I thought it'd be, because the number of teachers we have, I think we were promising in the 2,000.
Yes.
2,000 times how many,
We're up to 176 teachers now. That's up about 4 over last year. We've added 4 special ed teachers.
so do my math here, is that 350, 370?
Well, you got to keep in mind that there's multiple things with this. There's raises for teachers, talk to 3 additional SRO, and 3 counselors. And what I'll do at the January 14th meeting, I'll give you a detailed budget on that. We'll go through the construction tonight a little bit, but we'll go in greater detail on this budget. So yes, that number could go up, if that's what you're saying.
Well,
It
so
should.
I'm saying that the 370 is give or take teachers and safety officers, counselors, which are all good things we want to support. But the cost that even those additional 6 additional employees at 60,000, 70,000, that still doesn't add up to
Right.
973.
Right. Originally, this number was in the 800s,
Right.
so it's gone up about 100 and change. So we'll give you a real detailed budget on that. I'll get it to you before the 14th, so you can give us some feedback on that. Well, we're talking about going 3. Our goal is to have one at the middle school, keep the one at the high school, which we split the cost with the city, have 1 full-time at the middle school, have 1 full-time at South Grove, and then have 1 split, Water Park and Central. And again, for those, for example, we had a Crime Stoppers this weekend. Kelly was working this week on a supposed threat at the middle school, so they having an extra officer would be important as we move forward. So we'll give you a detailed budget. We had shared something with you early on, but it has changed, and we haven't crunched those numbers. I need to get with Mayor Buckley to find out what the updated cost on hiring a new officer is. So, and he and I have been playing phone tag, so I can get that information to you. And a counselor is going to be here. The counselor is going to be, depending on years of experience, going to be close to 60. An officer, previously we budgeted about 85, with everything associated with an officer. And then, we have not recently, we met with the teachers, we didn't talk about a dollar amount purposely because it has to be bargained. But, this will easily cover a $2,000 increase in benefits and salary, but that still keeps us last in Marion County. So if we have extra dollars, our goal would be to put that on our teachers' salaries starting in January of 21. But again, we'll come back and crunch that. So.
Any questions?
One last thing. Just because we approve the 20 cents on this, when we get to December 20 for 21, we do not have to put that in place. Does that make sense? So we may come back year 1 and only do 18. So that's a decision we can make based on budget, based on what we're doing. Again, we got a lot more flexibility now than we did 3 or 4 years ago when we were talking about, and 15, on what we're able to do. And we're much more optimistic about AV. Remember, our AV in 2008 was 520 million. We're slowly creeping back up and recovering from that downfall. We went from 520 down to 350. And it's just gradually we've gone back up, which is, we actually had a few dollars in some of our accounts this year we haven't had. Plus we made a lot of cuts. So we've got a lot of flexibility. Just because the voters approved 55, we don't have to charge 55. Speedway never has charged their full amount on their referendum. But they have a lot more, they don't have a circle record loss. and they have a lot more business and industry. So again, we have a lot of flexibility before this ever hits the May of '21 taxes. So we'll make that decision in December of '20.
We're still the smallest district in Marion County next to Beaver.
Yes. Yeah. Lowest AB and smallest. We're twice the number of kids they are, but they're 100 million more than we are. So. Questions on?
So next slide is, we talked about $17.5 million borrowing, the 25 tax rate. We talked about an additional 20-cent operating referendum on top of 35 cents. So the total ask for the main vote, 25-cent construction, 20-cent operating is 45 cents. So what does this mean to your taxpayers? That's what most people would like to know. Here we have a table that summarizes certain residential home values, and all the way up from 250,000 to 50,000, and also the median home value within each gross school. So I just want to take a few minutes to really break down these numbers, and a lot of numbers. I'm going to draw your attention to the median home value within each gross school. We pulled that from the U.S. Census Bureau at 5-year estimates, $95,700. That's the market value of the home. Taxes are paid on the net assessed value of the home. So you have your standard deduction, supplemental percent deduction, and if you have a mortgage, you have a mortgage credit. That's what this second column represents, is that this is the assessed value on which these taxpayers will pay taxes on, assuming those three deductions. Those are standard deductions, by the way. That's not, that's a little fairly standard. For the construction referendum, on an annual basis of your median home, be $74.89 a year. But most people pay their mortgages, their property tax in escrow monthly. So we always show a monthly taxpayer impact as well. So what does this mean to you on a monthly basis? So it's $74.89 on a monthly basis. It's $6.24 for the construction piece. The operating referendum passed. On the median home, you're looking at $59.91 on an annual basis. On a monthly basis, $4.99. So this far right column is each of the monthly and the annual total of both, assuming both referendums are approved. Your median home value taxpayer will be paying $11.23 extra a month, and that would be $134.80 a year. So we've broken this out on basis, again, on different home assessed values, 50, 75, 100, 250,000. We've also provided this for your businesses, your commercial rental properties. So a $100,000 business, again, the total monthly impact of $37.50, that would be $450.
This is on top of 35 cents we already have in place.
Yes. Yes. This is on top of the 35. So
But it still doesn't exceed the tax rate that we were at in 2008, which is amazing. So on the next slide, I think this graph is great that he's provided, because this is assuming no value growth at all. And so AB stays flat. We've seen 3 to 8% for 5 consecutive years. So we're now in a trending mode of taxes. And so that is a nice gradual climb. If there's no change, we're going to phase it in. Again, we are committed to phasing it in. First year, $59.91, so about $60. Or $4.99 a month. We mentioned that a number of times. Second year, $83, and then the full impact won't be for 3 years. But the nice thing about the $134 is we continue to see a 3, 5, and again, last year was approximately 8% increase in AV. So this is assuming a 1% AV growth. When we work the budget, we're only going to put 0.24, and so the impact will be $1.32.
Does anybody have any questions on that? That's what we're talking, as the AV goes up, we're going to lower the tax rate, which then will lower the
So in my opinion, a more expected growth pattern is closer to this area here at 3% over 3 years. And that's still pretty conservative compared to what we've seen in the last 3 years. So if this happens at a 2% increase, the day of the full impact, I would only advertise 23.5 cents, generating an impact of $130. Again, we're still just phasing this in over the 3 years. Every year, this tax rate, 23 cents, goes down. Here with the 3%, what we have experienced in the last 3 to 4 years is a very good 3% clip. We're down to 22 cents. So as you can see, as we move forward, if our city, if everything we see going on with the value of our land, economy, everything just remains consistent, like we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, then when we get to 2023, we anticipate not advertising 25 cents, but we'll advertise 22 cents. So that's just in the first 3 years. And so you can see how to generate the money to make the bond payments, we can lower the tax impact every single year.
Address that, how we continue to do that beyond the 3-year discharge.
So, well, that, I don't know if we'll go much more below 20 and 19 and 18, because once we get into the 2027, so we've talked about it through 2023, when we get to 2027, we really would be able to lower the 35 cents operating. Because now, once we get down to year into year, our circuit breaker, which is the loss of money because of the tax caps, will be reduced because our total tax rate will be able to go down substantially. That will flow dollars into operations costs that we are right now with the 35 cents operating referendum. So when you talk about a 55 cent, that 55 portion, so the earlier portion I was talking about was strategically construction of referendum operating, because we need a standard set of revenue, that 1.2 million standard. That'll lower the tax rate. As we get into this jump, and this jump, it flows dollars into the operating referendum, and the overall tax rate will be impacted dramatically. And at that time, and I know it's hard to look out to the future of 2027, but that's a huge, huge time in our life. We will be in a point where we flow dollars into our operations account. And we have not had $1. We had to keep our referendum at 35 cents because we haven't had $1 in operations since 2010, 9 years. So it's very difficult. But this is a very encouraging chart for the future, in my opinion, for the entire city and the school board. The nice thing about this, the improvements that are going to be done, the $17 million, is a 10-year, 8-year, I mean, we have refreshed the central, we have HVAC in all the buildings, we have floors, we have carpet, and now if we do the site plan in an early childhood, I really don't think that we need building improvements for 10 years. So you take us from here to 2029, and we would be making a plan, or it wouldn't be a tax increase, it's just filling in this line to maintain our buildings. So it's an exciting time, in my opinion, and this is a 10-year fix. And that's, set the tax rate, that's what I do. So, any questions for me on that? Yeah.
Can we get this page with the $30, the whole 80 cents, so we can see?
So the 35?
Yeah, with the additional 35 on it, because this is just showing the growth.
55.
Well, it's got the 45, but we've already, this is on top of the 30. I want
Well,
to
the
see,
35, yeah.
I want to see the whole shebang. Because we'll have people ask us,
Right.
this is on top, I mean, you look at this and say, oh, it's 45 cents, no big deal, but it's on top of this additional
Yeah, so
35.
35 cents.
But also, the thing to keep in mind, this is where, this is it's not an easy decision, but we're going to go up, and then we're going to be going down, and that's what we're going to sell to our community. And, I use the term bang for a buck. We're going to get a lot of bang for our buck. And, we talked earlier that people shop facilities. Cascades enrollment went up, they upgraded the facilities, Trade Central upgraded. And then that helps us, again, on the whole teacher side. I mean, on enrollment, it's hard to isolate and say we're doing this. It's a total package, we're trying to draw our kids back and keep our kids here. And I know as you think about this from cost, that's an impact. But if you think what other districts are doing impact, this is a small impact compared to what other districts are doing. Not that we really care to a certain extent, it's about us. But, you know, as I said at our meeting in August, you know, our feeling is we go for it and see what the community says. If they tell us no, they tell us no. And then we back off all these facilities, and then we'll come back in 2 years and do an operating referendum. Again, I want to emphasize that as we think about this, and we're going to eat, and I'll show you the budget. You know, our feeling is we need to go for it, and if they tell us no, they tell us no. And then we'll have to renew the current operating referendum at 35 cents, and we'll renew it at 35, and we'll do what we can do. Then as that AV starts to drop, then we'll have resources to do more. But again, and our gut feeling is we've had a lot of meetings so far. We have a lot of support for this, and our feeling is let's try and see what happens. So, any questions for now? If not, we'll eat. Go ahead.
What year is that 35, or 35?
Okay, so I always have to use my fingers for this. So it started in 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, because the last operating reference were 7. The new null now takes them to 8. So it'll be 22, the 22 budget year. So that means we would start the campaign in 21. And again, we would just come back and ask them to renew it at no increase. Pretty simple at that point in time.
But if it hasn't May, if we're gonna let that 35 cents.
It renews.
It renews, it goes from 35 to 55 and stays for 8 years. For example, it's really interesting. Decatur Township, they dropped theirs 2 cents and had less votes than they had the last time. I mean, this is not an easy sell, to be honest with you, across the board because of people on taxes. But our gut feeling is we're going to do this for our kids and our teachers, and you know, we'll take some bumps and see what happens with it.
Did I understand you correctly in that you're saying 2027, which is 8 years from now, approximately, you don't think that we will have to renew the operating reference? Well, the 35 cent, well, we'll have 2 operating references.
No, it's just one. It's just 55
Well,
cents.
at that point, 55 cents.
Yeah, just one.
So, at that point, how
We
much
could
do you
drop it
think
to
we have?
35. We still at this level would be at 35 cents because the circuit breaker is still in effect.
But we can drop it
So we can
substantially.
drop it from 55
To 35 in 2027, and then here, if we did no capital improvements, but by then, you're gonna, you know, I mean, we've been working on a roof plan, I mean, we've been doing roofs, maintenance and facilities of things that were built in 1960 and or
In 1915.
is tough. So the roofs and the windows, different things there'll be a whole different conversation here. Plus, it anticipated AV growth and economic growth over time. That's too far out for me to anticipate. But
Right.
theoretically,
We can drop it.
you wouldn't have to have any operating.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, you know, you get homeowners tired of multiple referendums and,
Sure.
you know, and I know what you're saying, this isn't maybe our last construction referendum, but if someone says, well, when's the next one? When are you gonna ask me for more money? Well, frankly, it's gonna be in 8 years if you pass this one.
But I think that's what we drop it.
That's
We drop
correct.
it a nickel, for
But-
sure.
but
We've
we're
already had
dropping-
that strategy. We're gonna drop it a nickel, take it down to 50. Because, you know, if at that time, you can actually form the question, reduce down to 50. And again, that's what some schools have done. As your AB goes up, you drop that. So we're already planning. Tom and I talked
It
this
can go
out.
lower than 50 cents. At this
Yeah.
point in 2027,
It's all
I think
based
it
on
should go
that.
back to 35 cents with the AV going up. This is an important piece. And you're right. When will the next one be?
It's 8 years.
2027 is correct, but it will go from 55 to 35 cents and no construction.
And as we campaign, we feel confident telling people that 8 years from now, we're going to be able to drop it. And again, as you saw from this, as this goes forward, we're going to have a little blip that it's going to start going down, and we'll adjust that tax rate down. You know, because again, people, if they want to move here, they're going to look at property taxes. So,
Well, 8 years is better than, well, we've had,
Right, it's reoccurring. I agree.
3, you know, your last few years is better.
our new reality until the state funds building maintenance.
Tom and I teach at Indiana State. We tell every person in our class, we have about 35 people, we tell them every year, and I teach the referendum component to them, said every one of you will do a referendum at some point in time in your career. Mitch Daniels made this statement before he was elected that we're going to become a referendum state. And that's where we are.
You have to wait and mention it.
I know that.
But it's true.
And here's the other reality. We were talking about this today. You know, it was great to have Red for Ed, but unless the state of Indiana does something with the revenue flow, you're not going to see a huge raise in teacher salaries. You know, right now, for next year, because we do a 2-year buy-in budget, if our enrollment doesn't change, we have about $300,000. We'll be able to give our teachers another $1,750. But if we don't do a referendum, we're never going to catch up with Marion County or even Hamilton and Avon. It's the only way to do it. And I mean, that's just the reality. And that's what Mitch Daniels said we were going to do. And the bottom line is, if we can't pay our teachers, I mean, we had a teacher 2 weeks ago, took a job at Whiteland. Now he's staying, that's another story. But what we, and it's not just us guys, it's happening all over the state of Indiana. You can go anywhere you want to. So again, doing the 20 cents is critical, but at the same time, keep in mind, as Tom said, this is a blip, and then we can really start managing our tax rate for the first time. Again, a lot of growth in Beech Grove, a lot of positives going on. Again, we said AB going back up, which is going to allow it to keep those property taxes at a much more reasonable level moving forward. Some good questions. Anything else? No, we're going to, yeah.
But I have to believe this, okay? So here's my question. I need to see what I get in $17 million. I want it in writing what we're going to get. But what could we get for 16.5 and what could we get for 15.5? What do we have to give up for those additional dollars? Because maybe we have to give up a little bit for 15.5, but maybe that would be more easily swallowed by everybody in the community. I'm just curious.
I think the answer that with the research we've done, I have $24 million worth of renovations and upkeep I need to do right now. I have $24 million worth of things that could be done today. If we start talking like that, we're gonna still have the worst football field in the entire Marion County. We're still gonna be playing in a mud hole. It's really to me, our kids deserve what every other Marion County school gets. I watch them play at all these other schools, and it's hard for me, since I've seen my kids at some places and I taught at a different school. We can afford uniforms, and we have a lot of pride. But it is what it is, and this is the new reality. But if we start taking things away, every single child here is going to notice it.
I don't think the question is whether or not what we need and what we don't need. We all know where we're at as far as the facilities that we need, but I'm thinking in layman's terms, like my mom, who is on fixed income, whose house is paid for, and her assessed value with the additional rate that we're looking at, she's going to have to come up with an additional, when I say she, I mean me, my brother, my sister, an additional $40 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we already supplement everything else that goes on in our house because Social Security doesn't get it. And unfortunately, her and my stepfather didn't do their due diligence to make sure that they had money savings for this time in their life, but it's where we're at. And I know that she's not the only one in that position. So I'm an advocate for those people and for the ones that live paycheck to paycheck that are trying to make their mortgage payments that can't come up with an additional $400 come tax time. And I'm not saying that I'm against it. I'm just saying I understand what she's saying. You know, there's no doubt.
The same conversation will come up, I think,
Janice-
$37 and $35 and $29, $22.
It's just like I was saying in our conversation, what you tell me is, we deserve a better football field. We do deserve a better football field. Our kids deserve that, but we're talking $17 million, and you're telling me we deserve a better football field to somebody else. That's not justifying the amount of money. I just need to know
where the money's going so that when somebody asks me,
Jan-
I can tell them.
Janice, for dessert, I'll show it to you. That's our next handout.
Yep.
But we're gonna
Okay.
eat first, and then while we have dessert, I'll spread that out to you
It's
now.
not that I don't want to do
But-
it, it's just I have to know.
But one thing I want you, as you have your conversation, keep in mind this, and we shared this with you earlier, that Jerry Rolfson gave us. The increase in construction cost, if you wait 2 or 3 years on some of these projects, it's tremendous. And, you know, we've got a lot of we're gonna present a budget to you that is as accurate as of 3 o'clock today when Jerry and I updated it. And we have $2 some million worth of contingencies that, again, just because they approved the tax rate at 25, we don't have to do it. Do you understand that? We have, and because this is going to be phased in over a period of time, we can have some flexibility. So we can decide to go for 25, and let's say it's a 75% vote, everybody says yes. Well, people are in favor of it. It's 51-49, maybe we need to back off and not do as much. So I want you to keep in mind, the only final decision is the maximum. But we have until November of 20 when we're going to sell bonds. Correct? But if we did, I mean, so we have a lot of flexibility moving forward. And I think the vote's going to tell us a lot too. I mean, how many people support, how many don't? If it's, I mean, I've said before, if it's 51-49, well, I think we have to look at these projects, maybe try to lower the tax rate before we go sell bonds. So there's a lot of decisions we have to make. This is just allowing us to put the question on the ballot. And then I think our community is going to speak to us. And we'll know before we ever go to the poll whether where we're going.
I mean, I'll fight for our teachers. That's a
Me
given.
too.
That's
Me too.
without question. You know, make sure that our teachers, you know, and classified staff get the money that they deserve because they're underpaid as it is. But I understand again, you know, what she's talking about. What are we getting? What?
Yep.
Where's
We're
our?
going to share that with you in a couple of minutes, but let's go eat.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
In terms of bonds, I'm not saying the referendum amount will change at all, but say once we're authorized, instead of doing one large bond for the 17.5 million, if we did a 10 million bond and then planned a 7 million bond 2 years later, would that save us money? Because I know, like, we planned possibly the preschool would be done in 2 phases, and we could then we could do our highest priority projects first, and then continue the construction. Not do another vote, but then for at least 2 years, you're only paying interest on 10 million, not 17.5 million. So I mean, if that saves $500,000, would that be feasible?
That would definitely be something we would look into. As legally, I'm not bond counsel, I don't know exactly.
Jane's coming to the meeting in
Yeah.
January.
I don't know exactly how long you can wait, but we can definitely look at staggering it because why borrow for 17 million and you only need 10 million next year, right? You don't want to pay
Yeah, because
interest.
I'd kind of like to see project cash flow in terms of, you know, how much we think we would actually.
We have 4 phases over 3 years.
Actually, we
So
have
that's
grade 5.
5 phases. yeah.
Bob,
So
why don't
that's-
you-
that's
you
what
know,
we're-
Your cost of issuance would be more because there's very little difference in cost between one $27 million bond issue and 17. And you're going to pay almost as much as you did for each one of those in terms of.
So the cost of issuance will be a little bit
Cost of
more.
issuance could
Yeah.
increase, would most likely increase, yes, because you'd be accessing the market twice.
Let us kind of bring those scenarios. Like I said, let's see. Any other quick question? I don't want to shut my mouth, but we'll come back and again, we have purposely designed this with contingencies. And we have a kind of a first priority, second priority. And we actually are doing it with 5 different phases with some flexibility. So some great questions, great feedback. So Jess, why don't you guys lead us out?
I'm gonna run outside to get my phone's in my car.
Okay. Do you want us to call it?
What's up, buddy?
put it up here anyway. I tried to blow it up and kind of, for some reason it's disproportionate. So you have a rather large tabloid spreadsheet in front of you. Tom, I'm going to steal yours. So that way I can kind of talk from this. So again, these numbers are as good as we can get as of today. Jerry Rolfs and I worked on these today just to fine tune them. They really haven't changed a whole bunch, but I want you to look at the very top line, and I apologize, I did not put the line numbers and across so I could refer to them, but the bond revenue at 25 cents with the previous AV brought in 14,045,000 and change. With the AV going up 10 million at the same rate, it jumped to 16,693,899. It jumped up 2.6 million. Now, if you remember, now you've seen these numbers that Jason presented. We presented those to you some time ago, but they were more in the $14 million range. And at that time, we talked that we would follow up to complete the project with a common school loan. Based on these numbers, if we stay at 25 cents, we think we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. But we also have some flexibility built in. I want to emphasize, even if we go out and approve the question at 25 cents or whatever we come up with, that doesn't mean we have to tax it until the 1782 or when we sell the bonds. Once we sell the bonds, we got to go whatever rate we decide to go at. So, again, these are numbers that are based on square footage. If we remember back almost a year and a half ago, there was a spreadsheet. Jerry had the room, the square footage, and they applied construction cost. If we wait too much longer, I don't know how to define too much, 2-3 years, those costs per square feet are going to go up. They're not going to go down, especially with the extreme shortage of skilled trade laborers. And I could talk a long time about workforce and that. So, classroom renovations, 842,000. Those are going in the existing 20 classrooms at Hornet Park in renovating those rooms. Those rooms are more expensive to renovate than what we've already done because they're vinyl walls just like this. Whereas at Central, the middle school, the high school, and even South Grove, you go in, you paint, because they're block walls. So it's much less expensive to renovate, and we've been doing that in the other buildings, than it is in this building because the wall coverings are peeling. You gotta take the wall coverings off and redo them. Now, you can paint them, but it's tough to paint wall covering that's already peeling off. You gotta glue it, you know. So that's, you know, that's a pretty reasonable number for doing those 20 classrooms. Corridor finishes, upgrades, restroom lights, etc. Again, that's you know, new carpet, new lighting, again, new wall covering. The team support planning areas, we had 3 rooms we were converting for team planning, and those are 304. Special ed Title I, that was taking the current office space and renovating that. Give me a second here, I'll call it the floor plan so we can see that referred to. Okay, so there's the floor plan. So as a reference point, the mechanical receiving is this area here to the side. Occupational therapy addition. There was blue. Right there, a little bit right there. Public student toilet adjacent to multi-purpose. Believe it or not, this building has one set of restrooms for 420 odd kids. So adding the restrooms are a pretty critical component of it.
Because each classroom has one. Yeah, each classroom has one. Okay.
Yeah, they do. But it's tough to get.
Yeah.
So we have, our main restrooms are down right here. So if you're inside this building, you gotta come here, and you try to do that around specials sometimes.
We actually have a restroom schedule.
Well, restroom schedule, all right.
There's
So,
only
By putting extra restrooms, it helps a lot. Yes, yes.
Were we also supposed to get 2 more bids, designs, provided us for water department?
Well, I
We
think,
agreed that we would do that, we'd get 3.
well, we had that discussion in August, that based on timing, based on trying to get other people involved, I discussed that was not prudent with time or the effort putting forth through. This, when this goes out to bid, we'll have 2 to 3 people that will bid on it.
Gotcha.
So we'll get it then.
Then will we get alternate designs from other firms because we talked about that?
That'll be part of it.
Okay,
So,
all right.
for the 3 people that are on the board, I know it's been a while, but when we did the 15 renovations, actually, let's go back to the Science Academy. When we did the Science Academy addition, we had 3 or 4 firms we did a design build that put in, and they gave us different designs and different costs related to that. And then we have a committee that's made up, it's a design build committee, it's an architect, it's an engineer, Tom, Dale Reed, myself, I think Phil Wagner might have, I forget who else was on it. And we looked through those and picked a proposal based on design and cost. It's a combination. So that same thing will happen when we get down the road. But because of our timeline, because of all this, they're going to use the same construction cost as this. Now the design could be different. And we still have flexibility on how we do it, what we do, and when we do it. Okay? I'm glad you brought that up, Dennis. That's a good point. Again, just to kind of generally talk about this, moving the offices out here. This building was built in 2 phases for those that have been around. We added on here just kindergarten classrooms, and then we came back and added this. Again, I would not say this building is currently designed as a 21st century comprehensive classroom. We're trying to do that. If we decide as a group that we want to do this in even larger phases, we have some flexibility to do that. You'll see that as a cost associated with that. So there's the literacy room. Again, we've just hired our 2nd and 3rd special ed teacher. We've gone from 1, we'll be going to 3, right? I don't know if they're hired yet, but they're working on it. So we have 1 special ed teacher in the building that covers that building and Holy Name. We've hired 1, and then we're actually hiring a 2nd preschool teacher. Oh, they said yes, yeah. Okay. So a need for a larger special ed area is critical for us. That's also special ed in Title I. And then literacy, that's one of our rotations. That's currently housed in the media center. So that's what that is. So as you look at the design, for example, one of the options you'll see is multi-purpose room. We can delay that for a period of time, and you'll see that as an option as we start looking at trying to adjust and monitor costs from that standpoint. So again, trying to follow on this to give you the details of it. Again, the administration addition, again, we're pushing that out because we're remodeling and taking advantage of this space here. The 6 classrooms are right here. So the transition of that, and again, we're going to have 5 phases of this. Now when they hit, it depends on what we do, is we want to occupy these 2 rooms early on. And our plan at July 14th meeting is to come back and talk more about phases. I do want to suggest to the board that we have a work session the first week when we get back to school, because I just think we need to spend some more time talking about this before we get to the 14th. So I'll send a note out, we'll check our calendars, but I think the Tuesday we get back, it would be prudent for us to have a work session to walk through this in greater detail and give you some options. Does that seem to be okay with everybody? Yeah, whatever that Tuesday is. And we should be able, we'll meet in my office and we'll come up with some different, we'll look at some different things we can look at to address this in a prudent and financial way. But again, I want to, and we've given this document, you should have this in your binder, so I didn't pass it back out tonight. Now, the very VAV boxes, those that understand HVAC, they're the lifeblood of your building and the controls. Again, that's something that we have as an alternate to this. Whether we do that in 2021, 2, 3, or we have some flexibility with that. And again, we'll come back on the 7th with some more details on that. So pretty much getting this up to speed where we want it, it's $8.8 billion. When we were going to redo Forest Hill Elementary in Noblesville, and this was in 2003, it was going to be $15 to $18 million to renovate the elementary school. We decided not to do that because it was a 70-year-old building. And the reason it was so hard to renovate, it had cement ceilings. Okay, this building is much easier, and that was not expanding, that was just renovating. So we're getting a lot of bang for our buck with this, and it works out in a positive way. Any questions on the first part related to that? We'll come back and talk about suggestions and ideas here in a second. Okay, I never realized playgrounds are that expensive, but they are, especially for preschool. Because that playground has to be a it's got to be a more solid surface, especially if you're going to have special ed kids in wheelchairs and things like that. If you've seen some of these Field of Dreams type things, there's one in Plainfield, there's one down in Mooresville. It's almost like building a little turf area for a playground.
Is that outdoors or?
That's outdoors. It's outdoors. So, well, you traditionally you want the kids outside on swings and all the other stuff. So, yeah. So I know it sounds like odd, but that's the reality of construction. Bus loop again. Here's the bus loop. And again, if you go back to original plan, we talked about moving to this. Again, we X'd that out because just the cost was large, and we've already downsized this quite a bit over where we started with it.
But we decided to resurface that.
Yeah, we will at some point in time. We'll get Leslie Coding out to patch them right now, and they'll be okay. But at some point in time, as we move forward in the next 5 years, Mooresville just did theirs. You pretty much take them down to the grade levels like putting a brand new parking lot in. It's a little cheaper than moving them, but we also think that eventually moving softball to the 5 acres makes a lot of sense because there's no parking on a current softball facility. It's pretty good, decent field. Again, that's why we have that as one of our alternates. The auto drop off, again, there is cost, whether you like it or not. And one thing, we met this morning for about 2.5 hours. Now, we've already got the dry retention area to the north of the current baseball field, that'll remain. But just because there's going to be so much water surface, we had the discussion this morning about, we think we can put that under the Teacher Credit Union Veterans Stadium and the Jim Hensley Field. So that's why you see the price on here relatively high for storage and detention.
What is the 5 acres?
Right over here. Butler Avenue, we own the 5 acres.
Oh, okay.
On that note, also, Tom and Tom, we've decided, I sent you an email about thinking about purchasing that property. We're going to put that on the back burner. We don't think paying cash for, even though we think 6.9 acres would be good. I sent you that email earlier in the week. We just have too much else going on. We're going to put that, we're more interested in buying the property to the south of the current stadium, and we'll try to maybe do that after the referendum.
Are we still talking to Oscar?
Yes, well, we have. We're not sure Oscar talking to us, but we'll send Guido out to talk to him probably after the referendum. But to invest, even though we think there's some really potential with that, we just have so many other things that we need to do. I'll meet with the realtor and say, hey, if they're interested in selling on contract over a period of time, we might consider it. But to draw $200,000 out of our cash flow, we just don't think that's prudent.
I was gonna say, I don't know that I didn't hear any feedback from anyone. Just go ahead with that. I don't see any reason for us to.
No, we don't know. We just
Pursue, I don't see any reason.
we were approached by it. We looked into it. I sent you the information. Tom and I talked last week again this week. We just don't think, with everything else we have going on, to spend $200,000 on land that we're yet to be developed just doesn't make common sense right
It's not
now.
developable.
Well, if the other portion of that was available from the other church,
Yeah,
and it was a complete property,
yeah,
we could actually put
a lot of things.
something on it, with the way that it's zoned, the way the property lines are. I mean, I don't see
It's
it.
floodplain though.
You can't
The
put
problem is
anything
the
on it.
majority of
It's
it's floodplain.
completely-
Right.
Rick, could you put parking on it? I mean, like, could you put a transportation center down?
I would assume you would have to get a variance, but I'm sure it can be done.
There's just, the more we looked at it, it's just not a good time for us. So we just put that on the back burner. We decided if we are going to purchase any property, Rick had talked one time about putting a second baseball field on Oscar's property. That makes a lot more sense. Not that he's willing to sell. At one point in time he was, but it's not a good investment right now. So I'll contact the realtor tomorrow and tell him it's not in the cards for us right now. There is a local soccer group, a professional soccer group that's interested in buying it. Let them go at it. Because we need soccer fields, we need other youth fields. That we just don't feel right now that's a good use of our taxpayer dollars. So we put, just aside that we put that way on the back burner. Now, if they want to sell to us for $25,000 over 10 years or whatever, that might be reasonable, but it appears that they're cash strapped. And we just don't think that's good right now. So.
I don't know. Yeah, nobody's had any.
Yeah, I didn't know, no one sent me an email saying, yeah, let's go for it, so. But we had all time to think about it. That's all come up in the last 2 weeks, so we won't have a discussion, but we decided it's just not good. For a lot of different reasons. So, kind of continuing on with this, roundabout section, that would be more at the high school. What are the options? Notice we broke this down into first, second, third, and fourth alternates. You'll see that in the notes column. Stormwater detention, $400,000, that's, believe it or not, when you start digging and moving and trying to get water to go up, because the water has to flow. If we do it above ground, it's going to have to flow 2 directions. It's a very challenging, so, to do that. Band parking practice area, the stadium, the concessions, the baseball, 8-lane track, and I purposely put leveled in there because if you've been on that track, it's not level. Someone slow like me, if I'm going from if I'm going west to east and come around the corner, it's good because it goes downhill, and I need that extra speed. In high school softball, again, we have that as an alternate. The cafeteria kitchens lying down the middle school renovations, we think that's a must. We've started that process with Tom Gerhardt, Brian, and the architect. We've got some timelines on that. But the good thing is that our food service chart wells will throw in about $350,000 to help with the new equipment for that. So that really lessens that project where it might be.
Are we planning on resurfacing the middle school track outside of this?
We had not talked about that, but we know it's on our list of things to do. And I know when we first started talking about just resurfacing this track, it was going to be $300,000 and $400,000. But it's $750 to go down to the ground and expand to 8 lanes. But that is on our long-term list, and it's not because of wear and tear of our kids. It's all our community members that walk on it, which is great.
It's only $400,000 to approve that. I mean, considering cost of everything, $400,000 is nothing. We might be able to cut some here and cut some there and add that in or something.
With a couple other things.
Sure.
With the improvements that we're making, are we going to actively seek getting our students back from Franklin Township that we send over there now?
Amy, I'm sure you heard that question. I'll repeat it just in case you didn't.
Thank you.
Rick asked, at one point in time, we talked about trying to add special ed preschool and bring those kids back to Franklin Township. The problem we have is that you have 1 or 2 kids in this grade level, 1 or 2 kids in this grade level, and 1 or 2 on this. And it doesn't become fiscally feasible because you can't mix the grade levels as well. And we've had a lot of discussion on that. And it doesn't seem to work because you're going to have to build extra classrooms at all the buildings. You're going to have to hire the teachers. It becomes a huge financial endeavor that it's just beyond what we can do.
This is our layout, because the boys and girls in more restricted environments in Franklin Township, right, they need access to the same age peers. So if we, sorry guys, so if we have a 3rd grade student, but we have the placement here in Hornet Park, they wouldn't have access to the same age peers. So it's still too restrictive. So then on our continuum of services, they're not in their least restrictive environment. Whereas our boys and girls that are receiving their services in Franklin Township have access to the same age peers within that setting. And when we look at our layout, we have, I think, 2 students at Adams, and that is the K through 2. So we have a second grader and a kindergartner. We wouldn't be able to, we'd have to have a teacher and at least one assistant for that classroom, but we wouldn't be able to have one at Hornet Park and one at Central. You see the layout, we wouldn't be able to have on each building because of the staffing that goes with it, the space. And some classes may just have 1 student, and there's some years there might be 0. So it just kind of depends. I can't think of where I,
120.
yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry for sitting down the beginning.
Last question, Dr.
Yes,
Kaiser.
sir.
Not for you, either, sorry. Are there any provisions or discussions about possibly adding some solar to cut the cost for our electric bills that are no doubt going to continue to increase?
We've
over the
had
next
that
several years?
discussion with Performance Services. One of the options we talked about originally was putting it on the 5 acres, but we don't want to lose the 5 acres for expendability. The other option is to look at putting it on roofs, but again, you get into a lot of costs there. We're just not overly confident on the return on that. We kind of put that in the back room, but we can reignite that discussion with Performance.
I think
If we had, for example, Wayne Township, they took one of the youth baseball areas that wasn't quite being used, and they sucked a ton of money into it, but also they're going to get that money back pretty quickly. Our problem is, I mean, for example, like let's say we wanted to buy that land over there, we could buy it and put solar on it and probably pay for it.
Sure.
You know, I mean, so.
One of the reasons I ask is because I have done some research on it, and this is the last year, 2019,
Right.
that the state or federal will give 30% rebate back. Next year it'll be 26%, and it continues to drop off to 0.
Right.
So that's the only reason I say it is if it's going to happen, and with the increase in technology and the efficiency of solar, this makes sense to me.
Good question. So to maybe summarize this a little bit. So the furniture for Hornet Park is about $405,000. That's putting onto desk and chairs and teacher desk, and that's pretty standard. Gerhard got that updated on Monday. And so if we look at all the cost of renovations, and you know, it's about $16 million. Our budget is $16,693. So that gives us a contingency about $450 and change. But since Jerry Wolfson and I and Tom and others have done these projects before, that's not a large enough contingency going in. So what we did, we built in, for example, the softball field as a contingency, which means that based on how quotes come in, we can do that. We also built in the administrative visitor parking. I know it's $39,000, not a lot, but we were looking at things that we could hold off on. Now, there's a whole host of other things we can talk about based on the VAV boxes. You know, HVAC works, that it will become more efficient if we put those in. We put that as a fourth alternate, and we put the multi-purpose room as a third. And you're wondering why the order of that? We can come back, and I put this back up on the screen on purpose. Let's say we decide to cut this X amount of dollars. If it's in a building, we can come back and do we can lower this and look at a common school loan that dips into this. Okay, I'll repeat that. So if there's some concern about a individual tax increase with 25 cents, we can lower that and we can delay projects that are building based. So for example, we could delay the renovations inside Hornet Park 2 years. Actually, they would start for 2 years anyway based on our timeline. But let's say we want to put them out another year. We could come back and do a common school loan and have it kind of tiered and hit this, which lowers the tax impact short term. we leave some of this blip here. And then as our taxes start to drop, that can come on. We can work with the state to be able to do some things like that. So what I would suggest that we do is we have a meeting on the 7th and let Tom and work with bond counsel and try to come back. Let's say, for example, let's say we target doing 20 and 20 and not 25 and see what kind of impact that has and see how creative we can be on some of these things. The important reason why to do the athletic fields, I know we got the cart in front of the horse. You can't do the athletic fields with common school money. So that's why it's kind of important to do those in the bond issue, because we can come back and borrow other money. And again, we could even do another bond issue, but there is cost of issuance with that, where on a common school loan there's not. So let us work with our folks from, so this say I'm wrong, Baker Tilly. We'll talk to Jane and come back on the 7th with some options to think about, because we're hearing across the board there's concern about a 25-cent tax rate. So let us maybe target a 20-cent, a 20-20 approach to it.
So
January 7th,
work session.
6:30 in my office. And we'll see we'll come up with some different options to look at. Does that make sense to everybody? And,
Complexity.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we are. Dave, you're up with complexity.
Do we need a motion to close that hearing?
Yes.
I move, we close that hearing. I'll second. Thank you.
Probably should ask if anybody wants to speak in favor.
Oh, does anybody want to have any comments? Any
Any
patrons?
discussion on motion to close?
Well, on the presentation information.
I don't need the board.
Yeah. Anybody in the community want to speak on what we just presented? Now that we have a motion to close, so we do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we had a motion and we had a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Very close. Now we'll hear about complexity.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is David Marcotte, and I am the Executive Director of the Indiana Urban Schools Association. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I have 36 years of public school experience. Most recently, I was the superintendent of Mooresville, retired from there. I was principal and personnel director in Wayne Township for 13 years, and principal out in Danville. Started my administrative career up in Hobart, Indiana, Northwest Indiana. Taught at Decatur Central, and believe it or not, I met Paul. It must have been 1989. I was on the committee to hire the new principal at Decatur Central, so I'm responsible partly for his entry into administration. So we've known each other a very long time. I've known Dr. Keeley as well for a very long time. I've been traveling around the state giving this talk about the complexity index. School budgets, as you know, are crazy complicated. My head's spinning tonight, and I've been doing this for a while. I can't imagine your heads tonight. But what I'm going to do, though, tonight is focus on a very small part of your budget, and that is the complexity funding piece of tuition support. I'm not talking about referendums. I'm not talking about title money, special ed money, grant money. We're just going to be focusing on the part of your budget that gets funded by the state of Indiana. And we're going to discuss how and why you, especially Beech Grove, has been needing to run referendums. I'm going to show you what's happened to the budget. Kind of explain this. So let's go ahead and begin. Dr. Kaiser will be moving forward. I have one of those little clicky things, but it's not working. I have words that are bolded here that you may want to look at because they mean a significant part of this presentation. So what is complexity funding? It's the amount of additional dollars provided to you in tuition support determined by their complexity index on a per-student basis. So we have 3 words there: complexity funding, tuition support, and complexity index. Oh.
Short and sweet.
So tuition support is the total amount of dollars provided to schools by the state on a per-pupil basis. That is called tuition support. This is the main funding mechanism to educate children in our schools. And this is the breakdown of what tuition support consists of. A basic grant and a complexity grant equals tuition support. And for 2019, every single school district in the state, whether it's Beech Grove, or Carmel, or Hammond, or Evansville, it doesn't matter, you're receiving $5,352 per child. The complexity funding is added to that, which brings your total tuition support. So next, please, Paul. So the complexity grant is the amount of additional dollars determined by the complexity index. Okay? Next, please. Now here's the real complicated part. The complexity index is based on the number of students, families who enroll in TANF, SNAP, and have foster children living in your district. Now TANF is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Back in the day we called that welfare. And SNAP is a Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We used to call that food stamps. So the people in your community who apply, and that's the key word, apply for TANF and SNAP determines how much additional money you receive in your tuition support. And there again, it's the mathematical equation. You're getting the majority of your money is the basic grant, and you have the complexity grant added to it. So here's the trend in the tuition support. The basic grant has been increasing. That's the good news. But the complexity grant has been decreasing, and it's offsetting any significant increase in tuition support for high complexity school districts. That's an important term. A high complexity school district are families that have large enrollments of TANF and SNAP. That's high complexity district. Most of the members of the Urban Schools Association have high complexity student families. By the way, IUSA, Urban Schools, we are 37 districts in this state, mainly in Marion County and Lake County, but everywhere else, Fort Wayne, Evansville, Kokomo, Lafayette, Vigo County, which is Terre Haute. And it's only 37 districts, but it's over 350,000 students, or about 1/3 of the entire student population of Indiana is in our organization, and it's only 37 districts. So we have small schools like districts like Beech Grove and Speedway, and actually the smallest one is Whiting, up on the lake near Chicago. Whiting is only, I believe, 1,100 students, K-12, to Fort Wayne and IPS, which is 30-some thousand students. So anyway, that's what IUSA is. So high complexity means high families enrolled in the welfare and food stamp program. Low complexity is the opposite. So I had a conversation with Representative Houston, who is now going to be the new Speaker of the House, and I said to him that the trend of reducing the complexity grant is really hurting school districts like Beech Grove and Wayne Township and Hammond. And he told me that, well, Indiana is 14% less poor because they're changed it a few years back from the complexity index based on free and reduced lunch to TANF and SNAP. And I said, well, maybe that's so, but that doesn't mean that our schools are 14% less needy. We don't have 14% less non-English speaking students. We don't have 14% less students in need of remediation and so on. But they are just so focused on the fact that Indiana is less poor than we used to be. Now, to me, that's smoke and mirrors, but that's why they're basing their decisions on this.
One example, most Mexican-American families will not apply for food stamps.
Absolutely. And when, you know, I was principal at Ben Davis High School, and it's even our Hispanic, non-English speaking families would hand me the free and reduced lunch form because they knew me. but they're not going to go down to the county courthouse and sign up for these programs. So of course we're 14% less poor. That just means there's 14% less applications, in my opinion. So you're absolutely right. Okay. So what I've done was I pulled your numbers, and for the last 5 years, the good news is that your basic grant has gone up to the tune of 14.3%. That's really good news. From 45.87 to this year 53.52. Every school district in the state has gone up 14.3%. That's the really good news. The really bad news is that your complexity grant has gone down 28%. You used to get in 2015 $1,535. Now you're receiving $1,104. It's a 28% decrease in your funding. Add those together, and over the last 5 years, you've really only received 5.2% increase in state money. Not even enough to keep up with the inflation and paying light bill and health insurance and everything else. That's what's happening all across the state, the districts with high complexity families. I did a comparison of neighboring districts around you. There's your 14.3%. Every one of these districts received 14.3% increase in basic grant. But look at the decrease in complexity grant. Franklin Township lost 52%. But why did their tuition support go up 6%? Yours only 5.2%. Or why did Southern Hancock, which is New Pal, go up 11%? Yours go up only 5.2%. But look at IPS in 5 years, their budget actually, not budget, but their funding has actually gone down in 5 years. This is why. The dollars that have been reduced are significantly less in low complexity districts. So New Pal, or Southern Hancock, they lost 36% of their complexity grant, but they only lost $157. You've lost $431 per child. And you look at some of the higher complexity districts like IPS and Warren Township, they've lost almost $600 per child. That's the shell game that's being done with our tuition support in this state. So here's the increase. I did an analysis also of the 2020 and 2021 budgets because that was determined at the last session. You know, we're on a biennium 2-year cycle of budgeting. And so the legislators love to tout the fact that they've given public schools 2.5% for the next 2 years or 5%. They love saying that. However, I broke it down, and some are and some aren't. You're not receiving 5%. You're close. You're a lot better than some. You're receiving 4.9% increase, total increase in tuition support for the next 2 years. But look at the trend of some of our neighbors. And I'm not being at all disparaging the Carmels and the Center Groves. I'm not. It's not their fault they're getting more money. They're getting more money. But Carmel is receiving 6.3, Center Grove 6.1, Franklin Township 5.2, IPS only 3.2. Perry Township 3.9, Southern Hancock 5.3. The average urban school association is only 3.7 over the next 2 years. So you're receiving 4.9, which is really good compared to the rest of the people in our organization. The average is 3.7. I also broke it down by county. Hancock County is getting 5%, which is the average. Hamilton County is getting 5.9. Marion County, 4.1. So here's what's happening. Although the basic grant is increasing, when you add the decreasing in the complexity grant, more funding is going to the low complexity districts with fewer families enrolled in TANF and SNAP than the higher complexity districts. And here's something else I pulled that I didn't do when I made this presentation in Washington Township a couple of weeks ago. Remember the 2.5% each year? Well, vouchers are getting 6.8% increase. The public money being used for private and parochial education. Their increase was 6.8%. And I also pulled some local charters in your area. The Tinley Accelerated School, Andrew Brown Academy is 5.1, okay, right around the average. Tinley is 6.7. Irvington Community School, which is right up the road here, I mean, probably less than 2 miles away from here, 7.7% increase. Okay, Avondale Meadows, 8.8, and the Indianapolis Academy of Excellence, which I'm not sure where that's located, but they're receiving 10.6% increase in their funding. So when the state says they've given 5% increase in the next 2 years, some, not everyone. This is a very important slide that we need to talk about. Because even though I'm up here spouting off that the funding increases are less for Beech Grove than some of your neighbors, overall, we have to remember that districts with high complexity student families do receive more money than those who don't. The problem is that the trend is shifting. The increases are going to the low complexity districts and not the high complexity. But overall, for example, you do receive $6,610 in tuition support per child, even though Zionsville is the lowest in the state at $5,591. Now their increase is significantly higher than yours, but they still don't receive what you receive. Does that make sense? Because you have a higher complexity than Zionsville. So you still receive more money. It's just over the past several years, that increase isn't keeping up. Your neighbor, Center Grove, 5754, Southern Hancock, 5781. So a few years ago, when they were griping that they weren't getting enough money, they were right. They weren't receiving enough money, and they were really struggling to educate and build their buildings, and they didn't have enough money. So they lobbied the State House and said, we need more money. And so it's not their fault that the scheme that was developed was to take money from the increases from the high complexity districts and give it to the low complexity. That's been what happened. So another neighbor of yours, Warren Township, actually receives more money than you. IPS is 7176, and Gary is the highest in the entire state at $7,706. But you can imagine their high complexity enrollment is significantly higher than yours. They have a lot of families in TANF and SNAP. So we have to remember that even though we gripe that we're not getting the increases that we need, we have to kind of temper that with, but we still do receive more money than the low complexity districts. So it's a balancing act.
And I think one thing to keep in mind, we just hired 3 additional special ed teachers this year. We have a 25% special ed somewhere in that area. 2025 district-wide. You don't have that in Zions.
That's high. We have 20%. The average in the state of Indiana is about 14 or 15%.
Yeah. So when you talk about this, you talk about Gary, IPS, high poverty schools, you have higher needs. You need more counselors, you need more teaching assistants, you need more, I don't say smaller classrooms, even though our classrooms are much better than they were 5 years ago. There's just a lot of extra expenses that go into it.
Which I have as a perfect segue to my next couple of slides. There's been a complexity report that we commissioned from a man named Dr. Rob Takushian at the University of Georgia. He spent a significant amount of time down at IU, and his specialty was school funding. He's worked with the Indiana legislator on budgeting for years. He just happened to take a job down there, so we still hired him. Ourselves, the School Boards Association, the Superintendents Association, business officials, the small and rural schools. By the way, we think urban schools are getting kind of a tough budget. Our rural colleagues are in worse shape than we are, much worse. And these are the key findings. This report is complete research. I'm not making any of this stuff up. Everything that I've said so far is on the DOE website. But this report validates the fact of what's been happening. And these 5 key summary of a 50-page report I have here. And the first one is, in and this is really significant, is money does matter. For many, many years, we always would hear that class size doesn't matter. You don't need more money. The most important thing to have is a good teacher and a good principal, and you'll be fine. Well, that's been the thinking for a long, long time, but his research says not so fast. Schools providing more funding show better achievement gains, especially for our at-risk students. Number two, this is why you've run referendums, and a lot of your neighboring school districts are running referendums, and like Dr. Kaiser mentioned, Mitch Daniels said that it's a referendum state. This is why. Number two, in the last 10 years, Indiana has not increased per pupil funding for education when adjusting for inflation. In fact, it has declined. So, in today's dollars, back in 2010, those dollars would have been $7,687. Today, we're down to $6,741. That is actually almost $1,000 less per child if you take inflation into consideration that we receive today than we did 9 years ago. That's why we're running referendums in the state. Number three, in the last 10 years, this ratio of at-risk funding has declined from 17.2% of the entire tuition support down to 9.8. That's a 40% decrease in funding for at-risk children. Number four, this is the actual per pupil dollars. Went from $13.20 in 2010 to today, it's averaging $660. So that trend of reducing money to at-risk students certainly is being documented here in this report. And finally, Indiana's national ranking in education funding has fallen substantially over the last decade. We rank 38th in funding for education. Now you'll hear, I just heard it yesterday, that some legislators say, wait a minute, we are number 3 in the state when it comes to state-supported funding for public education. What that means is, remember when the state took over funding, not your property taxes? So when the state is putting in the money, yeah, it's number 3, but only 6 states in the United States do it the way we do it. Others have a portion. The state gives money and the property tax gives money. That's why we're 38th. So we have to read through all the statistics and kind of figure out what they're saying. So who are our at-risk students? And Dr. Kaiser mentioned this already. TANF and SNAP, these are students of poverty. There are English language learners. High mobility I put up there because we tend to forget about those children that come and go back and forth, back to Warren Township, to Beech Grove, to IPS, to Beech Grove. That is difficult to keep a child consistently up on their studies when they're moving around so much. So that's an at-risk determinant. They have remediation needs. They certainly have social emotional needs and health care needs. I remember when I was a principal on the west side, we had families using my school nurse as their primary care physician. They didn't have a doctor. So our school nurse was their doctor. Just is the reality of the situation sometimes. And I wrote here, needing more hands on deck. What that means is, when we have children in need, the basic concept is we need more hands on deck. And that means, oops, one more back. Go back one more. Go ahead. One more. Well, I must have deleted that slide, because this was my last slide. It's the next one. There it is. I somehow got these out of whack. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So when I say we need more hands on deck, that means you're lowering your class sizes. It means you're hiring more teachers. You're hiring more counselors, more social workers, nurses, instructional assistants, school psychologists, behavior specialists, and other special education supports. That's what our children need, because the elevator speech that I have and the elevator speech that you should talk to anyone who wants to hear when you're in an elevator for 20 seconds is that previous slide. It costs more to educate at-risk children. That's just fundamentally the bottom line, because you have more hands on deck with these children. That's why it costs more. That's complexity funding in a nutshell, and I certainly would answer any questions you might have. Yes?
So, rural students, how do they rank on the complexity index? They're low on they're low on the complexity index, so they're not as costly to.
Well, depending on the community, there are some rural districts in the state of Indiana that have exceedingly high poverty, very high poverty. And so their complexity index would actually be high, because they're a high complexity district, but they're getting cut as well.
Bloomfield, for example.
Crawford County.
Shoals, Indiana.
Pike County.
Extreme poverty down there. Now, they may not have the, well, I shouldn't even say this, there's some rural areas of Indiana that have a high English language learner population. Frankfurt and Logansport have really high Spanish-speaking population. So rural Indiana is in a world of hurt because they don't have the AV. Their AV is not going up like yours is. So the advantage of a suburban-urban environment is that the AV can generate more money. In a rural situation, they can't. And when you have a lot of farmers that are paying 2% as opposed to homeowners paying 1%, referendums are not passing in rural Indiana. So what's happening is over time, we're going to have the haves and the have-nots. Right now, you're the haves because you've been able to maintain what you're doing with referendum dollars, which is wonderful. But think about if you weren't able to do that. And that's what's happening in rural Indiana.
Have you made a comparison to the per student funding for AV? For example, I looked at Zionsville, and I saw that they made $3,600 per student, plus their $5,000 was approximately $9,000 when you added it all together, $9,000 per student. For us, we make $1,000, even with the referendum act. So our $6,000 plus $1,000 is still $2,500 or $2,000 less per student.
Right.
Than Zionsville. So when you take the value of the assessed area, the value of the homes, Center Grove, Zionsville, Hamilton County, can in many forms be twice as much funding per student. That analysis to me just blows my mind away. And then they still want to go do a referendum.
Yeah, which is creating the haves and the have-nots.
Which is the have and have.
Yeah.
Well, David, stay around a few minutes. I'll make just one quick closing comment. So, as we think about the operating referendum and the 20 cents, I'm hearing a lot of support for that. This presentation was to drive home the part of 3 SRO officers. Those are full-time counselors. Okay, they're just not guys with badges. And the other thing that as we go out and communicate this, think of the 2 months in the brace when they're not in school, they're on the road. In essence, we're adding 3 people to help supervise and provide police protection in the city of Beech Grove. Adding 3 counselors hits right up what Dave talked about. We're going to come back. We'll have some different options to discuss on the 7th. If you can stay around a few minutes, you and I and Tom are going to talk about what we can present back on the board on the 7th. We'll stay around and ask any questions. Thanks for your patience. We gave you a lot of stuff tonight. Oh, sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. We need a motion to approve the fundraiser request as presented.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Janice, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have the motion to approve the field trip requests.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And then we have the motion to approve the donations as presented.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
I want to make one thing. On Friday evening, Boys to Men are going to have their little annual chili cook-off. And I've heard that Dr. Julie in the running for that chili. That's what I've heard.
It'll be a little warm. Be prepared for South
Anyway,
Creek.
if anybody could just stop at 6:30 to 8:30, and I'll just be the whole time. That's what on Brian Healy's, full note, and I tried to.
Oh, it's here, I'm sorry, it's here.
It would really, the kids would really.
It's here, it's at the community center.
So if we could stop by. it'd be great.
Stop by on your way to the varsity basketball game.
That's right, because they can bring chili to the game.
We'll have little cups so you can taste them all.
There you go.
Right.
Can I ask for about 5